Hi, everyone. My name is Nate Bek. I'm a senior associate at Ascend. We're a Seattle-based pre-seed and seed venture capital firm focusing on B2B AI. Today, I have the privilege to moderate a panel with Fu Ha. He's a technical director at the AI2 Incubator. Before I get into my questions, would love to hand the floor to Fu Ha to kind of give a more in-depth introduction on kind of what he's working on and why he's perfect for this panel.
Yeah, so as Nick mentioned, I am a technical director at the AI2 Incubator. My day-to-day involves working with founders in a pre-seed stage. So as early as, founders having just an idea. And we work to support our founders to navigate from an idea to the point where they can raise funding from investors, navigating the journey of customer discovery, prototyping, signing up early customers and design partners, navigating early recruiting for the company, and of course, fundraising. My focus is initially on technical aspects of company building using AI. So I advise companies with respect to how to best use the advances in AI to build products. But increasingly, my scope has expanded to just across all activities in company building, as I mentioned, from customer discovery to fundraising.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a chance to kind of briefly go over your background. You were Semantic Scholar's first engineer and helped incorporate AI ideas there. What lessons from building a product have you been most valuable with your work now at the AI2 Incubator and how you help your portfolio companies?
I think, I came to AI2 from Microsoft when I was an engineer at Bing and at Bing Advertising. And Semantic Scholar, at its core, is a search engine for, academic papers. So I brought a lot of my experience from being there. And Semantic Scholar was designed to be a search engine for academic papers where we can experiment with a lot of advances in AI, techniques from natural language processing and so on, to really push the boundaries, push the envelope of what is possible with AI in building a product. So I guess in one thing that looking back 10 years later is, at the time we set up really ambitious goals in terms of what Semantic Scholar can do for the users. But 10 years later, we found that the goals was not ambitious enough, and that's just a sign of how far AI has progressed in the last 10 years. And with respect to lessons learned in terms of applying AI to build products, I think a lot about that experience and always encourage founders to think bigger because given the current capabilities of AI, you can aim to build a set of features for the users. But maybe the lesson here is you can always be more ambitious because AI is just advancing so quickly. And if you are going after more and more ambitious goals, then you can provide more values to the users and gain a competitive edge along the way. Of course, it has to be balanced with the reality of what is possible today. But thinking bigger is a big takeaway for me personally.
Yeah, and that kind of leads perfectly to my next question. So the AI2 Incubator, for context, has spun out more than 40 companies worth 1.4 billion. So when you think about the strong product-focused AI startup, what do they look like from day one? And how do you think about and evaluate the founders who lead those businesses, who lead with a business problem rather than just the AI technology?
Absolutely. I think because of our origin and heritage, coming from a research institute, right? So we are very conscious about, looking for meaningful problem to solve. Instead of starting with a research result or a specific technology, So, even from day one, we want to make sure that it's a clear focus for us and for the founders that we work with. Um, just like any other startup, we want founders of our companies to be really customer focused. They have to be really focused on customer discovery, understand deeply about the domain they are working in, um, having conversations with customers to really home in on the problems, the pain points that customers may have, and along the way, use that as the starting point to drive on the activities toward building the product, building the team around that.
Makes sense. There's a quote here that you tell founders to stay calm and focus on delivering the last mile of user experience. And I think with so much going on with AI, I think we can get distracted with everything we see in the headlines. So how do you help founders maintain focus when there's so many rapidly changing developments, there's so many changing headlines, but to focus, stay calm, as you say, on focusing on the customer and that last mile experience?
I think, for the last 3, 4 years, the progress in AI has been really, really, really quick. Thinking back about, you know, GPT-3 was released 4 or 5 years ago, and GPT-4 was released in 2023, so 2 years ago. Progress has been really rapid, and increasingly, it's just not possible to try to be up to date on everything that is going on, every announcement, every model announcement, every new tool announcement. So um, here at the AI2 Incubator, I take on the role and responsibilities of following the advances. And I spend a lot of time in terms of distilling the key learnings and the key takeaways from the announcements on the news that are coming out. And I try to provide that calmness to our founders in terms of, they don't have to do that job, which is kind of impossible job anyway. And they can come to me and have a conversations about, for the particular problem and the domain that they're focusing on, how should they think about all of these advances? In what way they can take advantage of the advances in AI without having to worry about the rapid pace of development in AI. So in a way, I try to provide that shield for our founders here at the AI2 Incubator, and they can come to me for this type of advice.
That makes sense. And when I think about the founders that I've spoken to and that I know out of the AI2 incubator, they're all incredibly technical. But one thing that kind of jumped out to me is the AI2 incubator discourages founders from building or fine-tuning their own models at the early stage. Yet, with the context that they're all so technical, uh, and exceptionally good at what they do in AI. How do you balance technical excellence with practical product development in the context of like why not fine tune or build models instead of focusing on customer and product development?
So our focus is working with companies, with founders in the pre-seed stage. And at this stage, the number one priority is to understand customer pain points, working with early adopters, beta customers, to home in on the problem that matters to them. Along the way, founders may need to build proof of concepts or very early versions of a product. And they have to do a lot of validation, iterating with customers to understand what to build and to whom, instead of exactly how to build the product and starting the journey of improving the product, improving the performance, the accuracy of the AI component, which is important, but not at this stage. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is with rapid advances in models, LLMs and multi-model models, um, anything that we can do on top of that in terms of fine-tuning, figuring out a way to improve accuracy, reducing hallucination. This kind of work can be very tricky because with a new release of a GPT or Claude, things can change very rapidly, and it's the wrong time at the pre-seed stage to invest in the kind of additional scaffolding and packaging that may become obsolete. And especially for a pre-seed company, you don't have a lot of resources. This type of really advanced fine-tuning work requires a lot of resources, compute, to do it well. And it's just not aligned with the priority for pre-seed company. And for highly technical founders, yes, we look for technical founders who are really, really good and awesome at what they do. But part of that is to being able to understand that, there are limitations to what they can do at this stage, and they have to think very holistically about the priorities of a pre-seed companies. Typically, I would not even encourage our companies to start the journey of fine-tuning models until at least Series A or even Series B. Right before that, it's just really, really not the right time to focus on this kind of really advanced AI work.
Kind of a hot take. I feel like a lot of the companies I speak to as an investor from day one are talking about fine-tuning or optimizing, pre-training a model. I guess on that note, when you are using calling an API or using foundation models to build a company on top of or a product, I hate to use the word AI wrapper, but how do you build true technical depth in a product that's differentiated when there's so many existing models, but everyone can access those models? And how do you work with your founders and help them craft skills that can create defensible businesses when they're not creating their own models?
I think, in a way, all the advances that we have seen in the last couple of years make it a very level playing field, in the sense that it's difficult to build technical differentiation and technical moat, right? There's still um, um, you still need to focus on getting the most out of LLMs, out of the AI models out there, in the sense of investing into prompt context engineering, building the scaffold I mentioned before to make sure that you can get the best out of models. But I think that is by itself is not enough. As you mentioned, you just cannot win by being a simple wrapper. But a lot of what makes a company, a startup successful has more to do with understanding a particular customer segment very deeply, building a really intuitive user experience that create tremendous value for that customer segment. Just being very focused and have high execution velocity to acquire customers, make them happy, have the right go-to-market strategy so that you can scale revenue very quickly. So, at the end of the day, the typical startup best practices still apply, and looking for just differentiation in AI, in technology alone, to me is a red herring, right? It's not the right way to compete. You have to own the particular domain, a customer segment, and just go and focus there.
When I was looking at some of our cross investments, and kind of on this similar note, one company that I think has really owned the customer segment of AI role plays is our company Udeley. It's an AI2 spin out company, something we've invested in, and we're very happy with their trajectory and kind of how Varun and Isha and the team have positioned the product and the user experience. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about how like Udeley or maybe another company that kind of exemplifies this, what you were just talking about.
Yeah, so I still remember when we started to work with Varun and Isha. back in the summer of 2021, I believe. So that's, post GPT-3, but I think a year and a half before ChatGPT or 2 years before GPT-4. So at the time, um, the product that we were working together, building together, I was actually working with Isha on building the very early version of Udeley. We thought a lot about how we can harness the capabilities of AI at that time, which was still very limited. Remember, it was a full 18 months before ChatGPT. So uh, I think I was very much advising, Isha and Varun in terms of, don't read too much about, what the latest AI can do for you. Really focus on, what makes Udemy a tool that the users want to use, right? We look at different kind of AI techniques, whether it's, estimating the pose of a presenter from a video capture, making sure that they are looking at the right direction, the pace of this presentation, speech, and everything. But at the end of the day, I always remind them to really stay focused on customers and what they need. And I think for the last, 3 or 4 years of the journey of Udemy, AI has advanced so fast and very quickly. They were early adopters of using GPT-4, and then later on the latest advances in AI to really completely change the user experience for Udemy users, using AI to analyze the content of the presentation, which was something that is not possible before ChatGPT. So it's really about stay focused on user experience, what makes a difference for the users, but at the same time, having a uh, keep very close attention to rapidly advancing AI capabilities and think about how those capabilities can rapidly change your product.
Yeah, I think it kind of exemplifies many of the points you've made before, and it's just an awesome company, and just like some of the other spinouts. I guess to shift gears here, and I want to make sure we touch on this. AI2 secured $200 million in computing power for startups. It was a big announcement. I posted it on LinkedIn. I was very excited about it. So. In that context, how should product-focused founders think about leveraging those compute resources without falling into the trap of feeling like they have, you know, no scarcity, right? Like I think you can maybe start over engineering or building a necessary infrastructure when you have the luxury of these computing resources. How do they still build with that scarcity and build with, unit economics and fundamental technical engineering at mind when, they have access to this great resource?
I think that's a great question. Um, I think the compute resource that we provide to our founders, to our companies, is wonderful. Um, Most of the time, our founders cannot really exhaust all the compute that they have at their disposal. And I am here to remind them that just because they have access to GPUs or a lot more compute than other startups, it doesn't mean that they have to use it, right? They have to stay focused on customers, the problems, right? In the pre-seed stage, it's about the navigation from the initial idea to a customer, ideal customer profile, the problem they have, and really an MVP that gives you an entry into the space, into the door. And along the way, you may need to run experiments, but it's fairly rare that our company exhausts all the compute. Nowadays, just out of the box, the AI models are very powerful, and really at this stage, you don't want to, as we discussed before, venture into the territory of starting to fine tune, tinkering with the models yourself, because it will be a distraction from the customer focus for a pre-seed company. in some cases, the compute that we have provided for our companies is very valuable because in those rare cases, our founders do need that compute. Uh, but that's not the regular case.
Right. That makes sense. And I wanted to jump ahead here and talk about the accelerator itself. It's kind of a unique perspective on it, and I think a lot of the people in the audience will appreciate kind of what that difference is, right? So traditional accelerators can be 12 weeks. It can be, a summer in SF with YC. But AI2 Incubator, you're more hands-on. You're working with your founders for 12 to 18 months. So during that time period, what specific support are you giving the product focus technical founders? And like, what milestone should they be hitting in that extended time period?
I think it's pretty much about customer traction, right? Companies need to navigate to a customer segments. They may have a handful of customers who are willing to be part of design partnership. They are willing to try out a product that is still very early. So that's really what we are looking for in terms of the progress, the fundamental progress for companies at the pre-seed stage. Of course, they have to go after a meaningful market opportunity. And this takes time, right? I think many YC companies, after the 3 month time with YC, they are still not quite there yet. They don't have the customer signals that would give them the line of sight to a seed round of funding, right? So in our case, because of our smaller scale and small operation, we work with a much smaller number of companies at any given time. We have the ability to continue to stay involved, very engaged with our companies, and make sure that our founders continue to refine and iterate and sometimes pivot from their initial ideas to the point where they do see the customer pull. They do have that design partnership or pilot customers. In that sense, you can think about our model as doing whatever it takes over a much longer period of time to make sure that our founders do get that customer traction so that they can go out and raise.
Makes sense. I think having more proof points before you go out into the wild real world is incredibly valuable, and we've seen that time again in just the quality of the spin out companies. I do want to kind of talk more broadly about technical founders that are in the audience today that are considering making that leap into entrepreneurship. What's your advice to them on identifying the right business problems, right? We've talked a lot about how the AI2 Incubator works to find business problems with technical founders. And so like if I'm a technical person in this audience and I want to find a business problem, what's your advice? And what resources should they seek out just as they start building that AI startup? What are the best things to look for?
I think this is a very common challenge for the technical founders that we work with. Um, I think, any one of us would be a kind of a expert in our own domains. So for technical founders, they may be very familiar with developer tools, right? So um, that tends to be the area where we gravitate toward. But I think the world out there is so diverse, and there are just so many different problems across different industries, across different job functions out there. In some case, opportunities kind of hide in plain sight. So for technical founders, uh, what I encourage them to do is to be open-minded, to go after, maybe industries or domains they are not familiar with, right? I think it can be challenging, but you can do that, especially nowadays with, advances in AI. You can use, ChatGPT Thinking Pro mode to go really deep into different industries and learn about a particular domain very quickly. that still requires the initial curiosity. So with these advances and capabilities of AI, that can help you learn very quickly, but that's still not sufficient. You still want to network and connect with domain experts, perhaps potential future co-founders, so that you can, complement what AI can give you with real human experience and expertise. But fundamentally, curiosity is the number one uh, requirement, I think, for technical founders to have the ability to look for opportunities that are outside of their domains.
I love that. I think that's one of the beautiful things about being a founder, or I guess in our shoes as well, is we're looking and parachuting into new industries and just, like you said, being endlessly curious and using some of those technical abilities to learn about the industry, learn their problems, and develop a solution for some of their problems. This next question, I think maybe those technical founders that might have a great job in the tech industry that are considering being a founder, but are maybe on the fence because of the statistic, right? 85, 90%. We hear it all the time, right? Most startups fail. So what are some of those key early indicators? I know with the AI2 Incubator, you work closely for a longer period of time on those customers to kind of alleviate some of those early signals and work through those to ensure more success. But if I'm a founder and I'm endlessly curious, I'm going out there looking for problems, and then I start building a solution. What are some of those early signals that I can look to maybe justify continue going in this direction, and then maybe raising funding and going on that long, scary, unlikely to be successful journey?
I guess even if a founder or a startup, a co-founder team um, um, join an incubator like AI2 Incubator or YC and so on, with a lot of support from folks like myself, whose job is to support founders and everything. It's still a very difficult journey, right? And there's no guarantee that you're going to get to the seed round, and getting to the seed round, it's just the starting point. There's still so much to work on after that. So it's been very challenging. I think that joining AI2 Incubator, the failure rate is going to improve quite a bit, but it's still not 100%. I mean, in terms of success. Um, so starting a company is just not for everyone, and for the folks out there who are passionate about making a change in the world, right? And they just have to do it, right? And they have on the uh, prerequisites in terms of curiosity, open mind, the technical ability, the customer obsession mindset. They should go and do it, but it's just not for everyone.
Yeah, it takes a special breed of person, I believe.
Yeah.
And we're looking for those people all the time. We have a few minutes left here. I do want to give you the floor. I've been asking questions, but parting shots, maybe leave on a good note about if you are one of those firewalker type personalities that can go through the journey of being a founder. What are some things that you're excited about, some parting shots, some advice, anything to leave the audience with?
I think what I'm really excited about is we talk a lot about AI capabilities that are advancing very quickly. And in the journey for founders, starting from an idea to the point where they can raise seed funding from investors, there's just so many ways you can use AI. Everything from, as that we discussed, using AI to go deep in a domain that you are not familiar with, learning things very quickly, to looking for a good idea, right? We talk about sometimes technical founders may not have the initial good idea, right? AI can be a, a sounding board to brainstorm, And then, just starting from an idea, of course, you have to do customer discovery to revalidate a lot of the hypotheses and assumptions. And along the way, I think increasingly I can see the role of AI to help with customer discovery there as well. You can even run your synthetic customer discovery to do a lot of the learning that you do to, during regular customer discovery. That way you can get to navigate to um, the ICP, the customer pain point, the shape of the initial product a lot faster. So I think that that's something that I highly encourage founders to experiment with AI to help them get from idea to seed a lot faster.
Well, this was endlessly interesting, and I'm incredibly grateful for your time, Vu. I know we're at time here, so thank you everyone for tuning in, and that concludes the session.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Nate.